If you pick up a Bible today, in 2026, you are holding a monument of human literature. It has shaped civilizations, inspired breathtaking art, and guided billions of lives. But there is a massive difference between a book being culturally monumental and a book being historically or scientifically reliable. For decades, we relied on a simple formula: the Bible said it, so it must have happened. But as our tools evolve, that formula is collapsing. Today, looking at the Bible through the lens of modern textual criticism, advanced archaeology, and AI-driven manuscript analysis, the verdict is clearer than ever. The Bible is not a flawless, unified record of truth. It is a deeply human, heavily edited, and historically flawed anthology. Let's look at the actual evidence, specifically, 3 major areas where the claim of absolute reliability completely falls apart. First, we have to look at how we got the text. Many people believe the Bible was written down once, perfectly, and preserved like a photograph across millennia. The reality is much messier. It is a centuries-long game of telephone. We do not possess a single original copy, no autographs of any biblical book. What we have are copies of copies of copies, written by human scribes who made mistakes, added notes in the margins that later got accidentally merged into the text, or intentionally changed passages to fit their preferred theological views. New technological breakthroughs have highlighted this issue dramatically. AI models trained on radiocarbon-dated manuscripts have completely shaken up the timeline of the Dead Sea Scrolls. We now know these texts were shifting and evolving much later than previously assumed. In the New Testament alone, there are hundreds of thousands of textual variants. While most are simple spelling mistakes, others are massive. The famous story of Jesus forgiving the woman caught in adultery in the Gospel of John? The earliest and most reliable manuscripts don't contain it at all. Scribes added it centuries later. The same goes for the dramatic last 12 verses of the Gospel of Mark. When the very endings and famous stories of the text are later additions, the foundation of absolute reliability erodes. The second breakdown occurs when we dig into the dirt. For a long time, the Bible was treated as a literal history textbook for the ancient Near East. But modern archaeology tells a completely different story. Take the foundational narrative of the Old Testament, the Exodus. The Bible claims that roughly 2 million Israelites wandered the Sinai desert for 40 years. Yet, despite over a century of intense archaeological sweeping, there is zero physical evidence of a massive, nomadic nation moving through that desert: no pottery, no encampments, no trash. Furthermore, Egyptian records, which kept meticulous track of military fortresses, trade, and even minor border skirmishes, contain no mention of a catastrophic slave revolt or the sudden loss of an entire labor force. When we look at the conquest of Canaan, the narrative fractures further. The book of Joshua describes the miraculous collapse of the walls of Jericho. But archaeology shows that during the time Joshua was supposedly conquering the region, Jericho didn't even have walls. The city had been abandoned for centuries. The grand, united monarchy of King David and King Solomon, described as a glorious, wealthy empire stretching across the region, is revealed by modern excavation to have been, at best, a modest, localized chiefdom. Archaeology frequently confirms that the places existed, but it routinely disproves the events the Bible claims happened there. Finally, the Bible is unreliable because it regularly argues with itself. It is presented as a singular, harmonious message, but it reads like a multi-century debate. Open the very first pages. Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 offer completely different creation orders. In chapter 1, animals are created before humans. In chapter 2, man is created, then the animals, then woman. Move to the New Testament, and the contradictions multiply. The Gospels provide wildly conflicting genealogies for Jesus. They completely disagree on the date and time of his crucifixion. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus dies the day after the Passover meal is eaten. In John, he dies the day before, at the exact moment the Passover lambs are being slaughtered. This wasn't a historical mistake, it was a deliberate theological rewrite by John to frame Jesus as the ultimate lamb. Recent discoveries continue to show just how fractured early Israelite worship really was. Excavations right outside the city of David have uncovered secondary temples operating simultaneously alongside Solomon's temple during the First Temple period. The Bible insists that true worship was centralized exclusively in Jerusalem and strictly monotheistic. The archaeology proves that real life was messy, decentralized, and highly polytheistic for centuries. Scribes rewrote the history later to make it look uniform. To say the Bible is unreliable in 2026 isn't an insult, it's an evidence-based fact. When a text contains historical inaccuracies, relies on centuries of unverified copying, and possesses internal contradictions that cannot be logically reconciled, it cannot be deemed reliable. It remains an extraordinary cultural treasure, a window into the ancient human mind, and a profoundly moving collection of literature. But as a definitive record of history, science, or absolute truth? The evidence has left that idea behind.